Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Area Chats. I'm your host, Paul Brogan, and we're about all things in the greater Concord region. The people, the places, and the things that make this a fascinating place to live, to work, and to play. When we're taping this, we are in the midst of a July heat wave. We've had heat and humidity, so it seems appropriate today that I have a guest who I think is really cool. Sorry, I didn't say that, did I? My guest, just briefly, I could talk about her for 25 minutes, but she is a Concord native, has a long history of public service. She served 7 terms as a state legislature and in the Merrimack County delegation, with 2 terms as chair of the House Commerce Committee. She was a Concord City Councilor, Concord School Board member, and on and on and on. But she is one of my favorite people in our community, and her name is Tara Reardon. And I would really like to welcome you to the show, and I hope you'll forgive me for that ridiculous pun at the beginning.
Thank you, Paul, and that was very flattering. Thank you very much.
Well, we are here to, we talked so much beforehand, but we're here to sort of talk about your latest endeavor, and you are running for the state senate.
I am. I didn't expect to run for the state senate. Becky Whitley was a great senator, a great representative for the Capital Region, but of course she decided to run for Congress and said she intended to vacate the seat. There were a couple of people who had signed up for run. They're fairly new people to the political landscape in the Capital Region. And I thought about it for a long time. I looked at the issues that we're facing. I looked at things specific to the Capital Region that we're facing over the next couple of years. And I had just retired, and I really thought 30 years worth of experience in relationships, in serving at all levels of government, was really what we needed at this point. I was pretty happily retired, but I would be happier making sure that the folks of the Capital Region, the hardworking Granite Staters that are in Concord, Bowen, Hopkinton, have a representative that can really represent the district well.
And we are at a time, truly at a time, where experience matters, I think. I don't think we can, not value what happens when somebody has experience and understands how to get things done. And I think that certainly you have proven that through the many years.
I agree, and I've said my priorities are the same priorities as a lot of Democrats: abortion, housing, public education, clean energy and climate, and the budget. This year the legislative budget, state budget is really going to be a challenge. But beyond that, Paul, the Capital Region alone is facing a new $600 million men's prison, a parking garage that's going up in the middle of downtown, and a parking garage that needs to come down on Store Street, which is a real opportunity there. We're building a forensic hospital on the state hospital grounds right next to a residential neighborhood, and we're widening I-93. Any one of those projects, coupled with another one that I'll talk about, takes a lot of coordination and relationships between state, local, sometimes county, depending on what's going on, what population that we're talking about. And the one other, the newest one I'll throw into the mix there is we all go by the bus station parking lot, particularly at peak times, February vacation, April vacation, and see the cars parked every possible place there. For me, that represents a car that's not on the highway. Taking the bus is the smartest way to get to Boston. It's smart for commuters, it's smart for vacationers. That parking lot is totally maxed out. And if it was just maxed out for vacations, that would be one thing, but I go by there regularly because now I'm thinking about this. That parking lot is totally full. It's owned by the state of New Hampshire. The bus company just leases. We need to be really thoughtful about that. We can do a lot of things to affect climate change, but taking another car off the road, especially a commuter every day, is a really important piece to that. So it's things that I know from having lived here my whole life. I've gone to I-93 widening meetings for 10 years now. I think we've been talking about that. And I do know the parties that are involved, and I am, I think, a great voice for the city of Concord. I've been on the city council before, and I really think it's a shame not to have somebody with that kind of experience and working knowledge in representing us in the state senate.
And it is, each of the issues you addressed, I know are issues that a lot of people are very concerned about. And in fact, the forensic hospital, a lot of people are panic-stricken about that and what that's going to mean to their community. I love the notion of getting rid of that parking garage on Store Street. And I thought of that like 40 years ago when I would come out of Callahan's Steakhouse and go down to where my car was and look at that and say, it was already dated then. It already looked like it was ready to sort of just crumble. So I'm glad that there's a serious possibility of that going.
Yeah, so I think it's now dated and dangerous. It's certainly beyond its useful life. I love that you brought up the building that Callahan's in. What a showpiece that is, that old stone warehouse. So if you envision, and I've actually stood across the street from this, if you envision that parking garage being gone and the Concord Antiques building with already a patio space built out in front of it, and that beautiful stone building, and on down Store Street, that's a second Main Street. And we need the state to be thoughtful about getting that parking garage down. And like, I'll compare it to the infrastructure for the women's prison when that was done recently. That's got to be the state's responsibility to do that, and on their dime, in my estimation. When the infrastructure issues arose with the prison before, there was some expectation that somehow the Concord taxpayers would foot part of that bill. We're already doing that with the building of the prison, and it's really the state responsibility to spread that out over all of the taxpayers. So those are exactly the kind of issues that I think really need close paying attention to, and you've got to know when the meetings are, and you've got to know who to contact to get information about those kinds of things.
Is that garage used anymore on Store Street?
It is used, and it's used exclusively by legislators on legislative days, and by some other staff on non-legislative days. And that brings up, so that will be beautiful from the highway if that's not there, and we get to appreciate those really nice buildings. The other parking garage that's going to go up there in our very own little central park, as we call it now, between the Christian Science Church and the legislative building, that goes up there is exclusively for legislators. And certainly we don't have any right to it as citizens of the city of Concord. It is going to take a lot of cars off the street for us, so it'll improve the parking situation downtown. But I'm wondering if there can't be some discussions with the state police officers who now are parking behind the building or on the street, other personnel that's around there on non-legislative days. It would be a shame for that to remain vacant. And as long as there's some security around, it's used as it's expected to be. I think that's something that we certainly could discuss with the state, with the legislative
Which would be wonderful.
Staff.
I'm sure
Absolutely.
a lot of people would be very grateful for that. So the reason you are running for Senate is because of the reasons that you've just said. But you have a lifetime of public service. And, excuse me, what does that mean to you, and why did you in your life find yourself moving into that direction?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot because I talk to voters much more now. A Senate campaign is a really big campaign. And I will say that early on, this sounds like a really geeky thing to do, but in junior high, my friend Annie McLean, who is today Annie Custer, and I used to sit in the gallery of the legislature and watch the discussions. One of the hearings that we went to purposefully was the first abortion debate in the New Hampshire legislature. Certainly to junior high women, that was really an important discussion. The legislature agreed to limit it to 3 speakers on each side, and they spent the rest of the day on greyhound racing. And even as junior high students, we were appalled that something that we thought was so important was not a priority for the legislature. So it really did mean something to me that I felt like I wanted to be involved. A second example of the same thing that I tell the story of now is I used to hang out at the Y when I was a kid. That was a great place to be. In some cities, Ys house people who are traveling. They provide rooms for them, and not here. But I met 4 hitchhikers, and they were from Kent State and Ohio State, and they thought they were going to stay at the Y, and they couldn't. So because my family was like this, I brought them home. They said they were willing to sleep on a living room floor, and lots of people I knew did that back at the time. And my mother would figure out what she was going to feed us all. So we did that. And it was, I have a name for it now, but I didn't know the name for it then. They had just gone through the shootings at Kent State, and they knew people who had died. And 4 people died, and 11 people were shot by the National Guard. It was another sense of, for me, humanizing something I saw in the news. And there are so many issues nowadays where to prevail on an issue, one side or the other will dehumanize that issue. They make it about a thought and a concept, and sometimes about religion, not about the people who are involved. And I think that was my first early example of humanizing. So I've gone on not only to be a public elected official, but I worked for a nonprofit for 10 years. I worked for the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund. Listening is a skill that I think I was missing at some point in my life. I worked with mostly low, moderate income homeowners that lived in manufactured housing. We organized them to run their own communities by them and preserve their housing for the rest of their lives. That there was never a landlord that was going to tell them to take their home and go away, because we know that wasn't going to happen. So I think those kinds of opportunities in my life, how lucky was I to have those jobs, to get those experiences, to meet those people, are really what have really taught me my sense of community, what it means to me. A mother that, of course, would never say, you can't bring people home. People needed a place to sleep. Of course you brought them home. We had plenty, and we were not wealthy. We were poor, but if there was a room on the floor and there was something for dinner, that's plenty in our house. And I think all of my family members are like that. So as we were talking before, to live in a community where that is the norm, it is your responsibility to give back. It's my responsibility, if I have those skills and I know how to do those things, to be there to work on whatever the bills are. And if I have a voice that I can lead with, to lead for maybe those people that live in a manufactured housing park that don't have a voice, don't have the time. They're working at a convenience store counter. They don't have time to go do these things. So I really feel it's the responsibility of all of us to do that, and I am very lucky that I actually get to go do that. And the voters have sent me to do it numerous times.
Well, Concord is a special place. I mean, it truly, I've lived here years. And, but there is something about the community through the years that has remained consistent. What you were just talking about, a desire to go out and make a difference, however small it might be or however large it might be. But I think we were encouraged by the community itself and the setting and the energy, and to not just coast along through life, but to look for opportunities to find our little niche and where we might be able to help other people.
To be helpful. You know, quite a while back, there were New Americans in Concord who had some hate graffiti written on their home. To this day, I see the Love Thy Neighbor signs in people's windows, and I think it was such a great display of the indignation of the people that lived here, that somebody would come into our community and reflect badly on one of our new citizens that was here. That it's exactly just a perfect example of what you're talking about, that when something needs to be done, we rise to the occasion and get it done. Right.
And it's almost second nature. You don't have to sit and ponder and I'll think about it tonight and make a decision in the morning. It's an instinctive thing that I think was a part of all of those who came before us in the community. Because growing up, I mean, my parents were always, whether it was Holy Name Society or, Friends of the Library, my dad was president of that, just something needs to be done, and I'm just going to go and do it. Even if I've worked 8 hours, 9 hours that day, I'm going to spend my evenings trying to make that extra difference and do what can be.
It's absolutely true. I got a survey as a candidate the other day from the Save the Children network. I remember in junior high, the student council somehow learned something about a need of Save the Children, and we spent our time that year raising money for Save the Children. We just needed that prompt that there was a need, and we sought to do what we could about addressing that need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. Much of the country, we hear about the divisions and how, everything is either this or that, and there's not a lot of middle ground. How do you think, as a senator, you can help to try to bring both sides together and not have it continue to be so angry and
Yeah. I served on the Commerce Committee, as you noted, for 7 terms, and in 2 of those terms, I was the chair of the Commerce Committee. It was very unusual for the Commerce Committee to not be unanimous about the decision that they came to. Whatever we were working on, insurance, banking, manufactured housing was one of our things. And it's really setting aside what party, initial is after your name, looking at what the issue is that's affecting people who generally don't have the time or ability to come before us to make somebody who lives in New Hampshire's life better. And I think when we talk about the goals, I think we'd be hard-pressed for me to sit down with 5 other Democrats and 5 other Republicans and say, we want the best for our children, and this is what we think is the best. Our paths to get there are going to differ greatly, but we were unanimous so often in the Commerce Committee because we did talk about the paths and what kind of compromises we could make, and then we would go to lunch together after that. We did the work, we were socially, we got along fine with each other after that. I know several Republican senators right now. I've worked with them. I actually lobbied for the last 2 years for the Community Loan Fund, doing their manufactured housing work for them. I never had a conversation that was different with a Democratic senator than I did with a Republican senator, because it was about housing for low and moderate income people, which is a goal that we all need to embrace because we've ignored it for far too long. The deficit we have is huge. And I think it's the exact same thing, and I am happy to have a beer with anybody afterwards, when we're done for the day. There are things we're going to fundamentally disagree on, and I recognize that, but it's not important enough to me to not work on the 100 other things that we all want to make some progress on, because we do disagree on a couple of those things. And a couple of those things might be really contentious issues, and if we leave that at the door, then that works. I had a great success rate when I was in the legislature. 80% of bills that I sponsored passed. Wow. And 75% of the bills that I was on with somebody else passed, which is a pretty good success rate. I think part of that is just common sense. Knowing what the issue is, talking to people, researching it before you get in the middle of it. The time for a new discussion is not at the hearing table in the legislative forum. I recall it being something I learned. I served 12 years on the zoning board in Concord. The number of times that neighbors got a notice about something that was going to happen next door to them and came with just vitriol to a meeting and saying these horrible things they assumed, and they had never had a conversation with their next door neighbor, is really something that it wastes a lot of time and energy for all of us, and not to mention the blood pressure that's happening there. If we have a dialogue in advance of doing those things, I think we can make some progress. I know there's things that are the most important thing in the world to them, and they need to know what's the most important thing in the world to me, and hopefully we'll move forward to do that.
You don't see any chance of a state income tax or sales tax coming in any time in the future, do you?
I can hear Mel Thompson in the back of my head as you start saying that. I think Andy Valinsky was the last one who sought public office with being pro that.
Yes.
So I think no, I don't think people have the appetite to do it. With that said, budget-wise, we just saw the state made a lot of money on ARPA funds and stuff that were sitting in accounts. Lots of interest there. The interest and dividends tax, a fair amount of money on that, not a wild amount or anything. Both of those disappear next year. That's the end of it. These last few legislators have lowered that business profits and business enterprise tax, so those numbers are declining. So we need housing very, very badly.
Yes.
We need housing because businesses can't expand because their workers have no place to live. People can't stay because they have no place to live. If we get housing under control, businesses can then hire more workers. Business profits tax are going to go up. We're going to start seeing that trending the other way. Not to mention, with more housing, we're expanding the tax base.
Exactly.
And that's some tax relief for all people. So not a lot of people talk about budgets on the campaign trail, but budgets are critically important.
Incredibly.
I love a budget. I do them at the county every year, and we've had great success really keeping that rate almost flat, except for this last year. But those are the things that we have to think 9 steps down the road about if we do this. Now, we may see that the business profits tax and the business enterprise tax start trending back up. If we don't see that, we're going to have a conversation about what the source of revenue is. And while we're talking about revenue, I'll say cannabis. In the past, with the advice of the New Hampshire Chief of Police Association, and this was, I haven't been in the legislature since 2009, but I had voted against it each time they had some real concerns about it. The reality is we're the donut hole right now. Everybody around us is legal, and they're deriving revenue for it, and it's silly for us. You know, if it's liquor in New Hampshire. If you want it, you come here and get it. If you want cannabis here in New Hampshire, you can go any which way and get that. So I think it's irresponsible of us not to take advantage of that revenue source. We'll see what it gets us here. Hopefully at least as much as gambling DraftKings.
Exactly. Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly. What is your favorite thing about Concord and living in this area, the area that you want to represent?
My favorite thing about Concord is it may be the park system. You know, the city is mandated to do a lot of things by statute or by constitution. Parks and libraries are not one of them, but we embrace those nevertheless, and I think that says a lot about our community too. In Concord, you can walk to a pool no matter where you live. And it's a free source of recreation, entertainment, you know, outdoor time for kids. I am a huge proponent of playgrounds and parks, so I think I was a lifeguard at White's Park when when I first was in college. That was my summer job. Great summer job for kids, and there were playground recreational kind of coordinators at that time too, which is great for college kids. Get them to come back here instead of going someplace else in between years. So I think our park system, our community center on the Heights is just a real gem. Especially when you grow up with the Green Street Community Center, which was great. We loved it. But compared to the Heights Community Center.
It was very limited in what it did. But our library system is amazing. Our library
really
is
fortunate.
We are. We're very fortunate. Very fortunate.
It would be easy to. That would be an easy thing to cut when we get in hard times, because we all know it's at the city, at the state, at the county, it's always about 85% of your costs are always personnel, and the last thing you want to cut is people. So things like that become really attractive. Either your street's not getting paved or something's not going to happen with the library. So I think we're fortunate that Concord's embraced those two things.
One of the things about you is your willingness and enthusiasm in listening to people, and that's something as long as I've known you, certainly, and in certainly the positions you've held, you've always been a listener to people. And that's a rather rare trait for some, you know, in some sectors. It's not nearly as prevalent as it should be, but would that be something you would try to encourage others to do that you would be serving with, the value of listening to your constituents and hearing what they're saying.
Yeah, we already know what we think. The only way we learn
Yes.
more is by hearing what somebody else thinks. And certainly, I don't have the solution to most problems. And there are some very smart and very creative people out there that we can that we can rely on to make some progress.
Yes.
But I participated in a really interesting course once, and it was at the Community Loan Fund early on when I was there. And it was about listening not only for words, but for facts that people have, for emotions that people have, for body language, for passion. It was an incredible experience, and it would literally be a group of 4 of us where one person would tell a story or talk, and you would be assigned either body language or passion or emotion or facts. And the report outs from each person about that story that you heard were 100% different. So it's useful when I'm having a conversation to somebody to figure out when it's somebody and it's just fact after fact. That's easy to absorb. But sometimes when it's emotion, I think the follow-up question of tell me more is really where you're going to get your answer. It's not from them saying, I'm just so angry about that. And when you say, tell me more about that, you find out about an instance that happened to that person, and that's really what drives their need for change or the way they want to see something happen. So it was an invaluable experience that I have, and I wish everybody could do it, but certainly when I worked with folks that lived in manufactured housing that were low, moderate, and they were trying to save their housing, I don't have that experience. I can't identify unless they tell me that they're losing sleep at night because they think their landlord's mad at them and they're going to get kicked out of the park, which for your largest asset that you've ever owned, you're not even done paying for it, you've got 3 kids that live in this house, that is a lot for a single person to process and actually know what to do about that. So listening is the only way you know how to assist that person, and it might be referring them to a resource as opposed to a piece of legislation, but it all moves the ball forward for if you help anybody in that way, it's a win.
Exactly. And for many, they just want to be heard. They truly want to be heard and not dismissed or just, fine, I'll look into it and all of that. And that's a gift you have. And I might also reference your husband, the legendary mayor of Concord, more terms than anyone in history. Former mayor. I'm sorry. Sorry, Byron. But he made, only because I witnessed it many times, where somebody came away from speaking to him saying, now he's wonderful, he cares, and that's all that people so often need, because we live in a world where everything is so hectic and so much going on, and people are on their phones and on everything else, but the human touch, and that's the thing that can change so much for someone.
We have a regular routine in our house when we're talking about solving a problem or something that's happened. Say you're on the phone with an insurance company and they keep you on hold for 45 minutes or something like that. Our go-to analogy is always, what if I was a clerk at a convenience store? How would I solve this problem? You wouldn't.
No.
You wouldn't. You can't. They can't call you back. You can't stay on the phone like that. So I think it really forms our problem solving when we think in those terms. And it could be not that. You could be on some kind of production line. You could be on a front counter.
Exactly.
You could be in an office where that's just not something. You get a 15-minute break and that's it. But I think it's really important to recognize that you don't make these changes for us and for our lifestyle. We'll figure that out if we have to do that.
Yes.
But there's a lot of people that you have the ability to make things better for them if you can just look through, we call it their sunglasses. Everybody wears their own sunglasses, which are created by their experiences, their resources, their what's happened to them in their life. Yeah. Yeah.
Now the primary is when?
The primary is September 10th, and this district is all of the 10 wards in Concord and Bow and Hopkinton.
Bow and Hopkinton.
Yeah, I've never represented Hopkinton before. I represent Bow as a county commissioner now, both Concord and Bow, but Hopkinton's new for me, but I have got a lot of great support out there, an endorsement from Congresswoman Custer, an endorsement from Governor Lynch, and two of the state representatives that represent Bow and Hopkinton, Mel Myler and Dave Luna, both fabulous legislators, have endorsed me too. So that's a great feeling to get that kind of support from that community. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Well, it has gone by very quickly.
Sure has.
But it has been an honor to have you here and to talk about the things that matter to you, but also matter to all of us. And, you know, I know that you could be, as you said, enjoying retirement and all of that, but instead you have a calling to continue to serve people, as you've done for decades. And I think that's a remarkable and inspirational thing. And I hope that people will gather inspiration and say, gee, I could be doing this, or this myself, and gain the satisfaction, because you have such a joy about talking about the things that you want to do, the things that matter to you, and that's truly important. So I hope people will go out and vote. Regardless of who you vote for, just go out and do it, because there's a sense of satisfaction in having done that and being in a world and a country and a state and a community where you can do that.
Absolutely.
And you know that it will count and it matters and all of that. So Tara, thank you.
Thank you,
very
Paul.
much, and I wish you all of the best.
I appreciate it. Thank you
Thank
for having me.
All right. And thank you to everyone. Thank you to Matt, my great right hand. Thank you to ConcordTV. And please continue to let me know what you think of Capital Area Chats, because I do listen and I love to hear from you. So on behalf of all of us, thank you very much, and I'll see you again on the next edition.